Hi, I'm Hilarey with Wise Hearts Connect, and today I would like to share a real life experience from a face reading. So many years ago, I treated a young man, and one of the first things that I noticed about him is that he had very big eyes and very wide pupils. And what I noticed about him is that in a lot of ways, he had this openness and this receptivity, this sort of like he ingested the world with wonder. And from a face reading perspective, having big pupils suggests that this openness to the world, this, if you will, the word I use is like the aperture is just wide open. It's like you're ingesting everything, you're taking everything in. But the caution that is also wise when a person has big eyes like that, actually I liken it to raising children. Naturally, children have really big pupils, really big eyes, and their job as young children up to the age of 7, but even beyond that, is to take in everything, right? To take it in. And when the eyes are wide like that, oftentimes there is less of an awareness of discernment or shutting things down or judging in a potentially healthy way. So what that would mean is that when you see somebody who you're not quite sure about or you get a strange vibe from, if your eyes end up being very, very wide open, you're going to be receptive and potentially, willing to engage even maybe people that don't always have your best interest at heart. And so from a parental perspective, that's, if you will, the job of a parent, is that a parent will make sure that their children ideally are, protected, that they're not always around kind of everything. I think there was some news recently that a woman had brought a really small child to a pretty rowdy concert. And I think the musician called out the woman. It's like, why are you bringing your child here? Like, this is not a good place for like a 2-year-old child to be. And of course, in a lot of cases, I think we have that understanding, but that's the idea, is that when a person is really wide, there is this inclination at me as a parent to offer a little bit of protection and to offer a little bit of like letting my filter for them. So this patient with the big eyes in his late 20s, early 30s comes in, and I have to say, like, I adore that about him. And as a face reading and health practitioner, I also offered him this suggestion to be cautious about the positions that he puts himself in. So, frankly, it was like, be careful when you go to bars. Be careful when you are around random people, to just be aware that unfortunately not everybody has your best interests at heart. So when I told him this story, when I told him this information about his openness, he actually filled in some details for me, and he told me this really beautiful story. So he said that as a teenager, he lived next to this house, and this house, people had moved in, and they played like rap music, and maybe they were involved in gangs, but he could hear the music and he was just very interested. He was very interested in this like music. He enjoyed listening to it from what he could hear. And so over the course of time, he incorporated himself into this community. And at one point in his trajectory, hanging out with these people who became his friends, or he thought they were his friends, there was a big party that happened. And at the party, it was a party, I guess, for somebody who had been recently released from jail. So I don't know what the person did that was in jail, but he was released from jail, and there was this welcome home party. And so he was meeting this person for the first time. And I suppose he was like, a white kid in the midst of a whole bunch of, gang members. And this man also, I think, came from a pretty stable family. I think maybe his mother was a teacher and his father was a lawyer, but they came from different worlds, quite frankly. And he was very interested in this other world. But he said that the man who had been released from prison actually at this party pulled him aside and had a frank conversation. He's like, hey, we don't care about you. You have opportunities that we don't have. And he encouraged him. He's like, go get a job, like do something with your life. Take advantage of these opportunities that you have. And of course, I was reflecting on this story. I was like, wow, what a beautiful thing to offer you, right? This frank advice. And it's true, like take advantage of these opportunities. And so fast forward a few months, he took the advice. He went and he got a job, and he spent a bit less time with this community because he had this job, and he was on this trajectory of taking advantage of the resources that he had with the stability and, frankly, sadly, his white skin. And he said that a few months later, after this conversation, there was I guess a gang fight, and this man who had given him this advice was shot and killed. And I was really startled, of course. Like I said, wow, that's really intense. He said that he was still very touched by it. In fact, he would go and spend time with this man that he maybe only had a few brief conversations with, but he would, go to where he was buried and spend time with him there. At the service, this man's service, he went to the service because he wanted to pay his respects. And he said at the service, he was invited to go to a sporting event. So his other guys, after the service, were going to go to the sporting event, and they invited him to go, but he had to go to his job. So he's like, I'm really sorry I can't join you, but I have to go to work. And so he missed out on that. But on the way to the sporting event, those kids, this car with 4 kids was pulled over, and there were 4 kids in the car, and there were 5 guns, and they were all, I don't know if they went to jail, but they were in deep trouble. And he would have been the 5th one if he hadn't been at work, if he hadn't had this job that he had gone to. And I was kind of like taken aback. I was like, oh my God, this man, like, what a sweetheart. He saved your life. And my man that I was working with, my patient with the big wide eyes, he got really weepy. And I was like, well, what's going on? He's like, well, he said, not very many people would call him a sweetheart. And I said, well, he saved your life. And you had opportunities, and he wanted you to seize them. And, it behooved you to do it. And I'm so glad that he offered you that advice. And to me and to you, this man really did see you, and he did save your life. And I just thought it was a beautiful example of how we have these natural inclinations, right? The big wide eyes, right? I love seeing it, and how the world isn't always necessarily friendly to that, and how he did take that advice, and frankly, how he gave this really beautiful example of how this person, theoretically from the wrong side of the tracks and with the wrong, so to say, color of skin, protected him. And I think it was a poignant life lesson for this person. And it was a really beautiful and touching example to me of what face reading can offer in terms of explanation and understanding of our natural inclinations and talents and abilities and who we are, and how to maneuver those ways through the world. So thank you for your interest in listening to this story. And when you see big, wide-eyed people, maybe you'll remember that too. And notice yourself offering protective advice. Thank you.